Hello, I'm Aviva Weintraub, director of the New York Jewish Film Festival. The festival is co-presented by the Jewish Museum and Film at Lincoln Center annually in January. And we're so pleased that for this year's streaming virtual edition, we have the wonderful film Tahara. And I'm delighted to welcome to this afternoon's talk the film's director, Olivia and the film's writer and producer, Jess Zeidman. Thank you so much for being here.
It's good to be here virtually.
Yes, thank you for having us.
So we all on the selection team just love the film and are so pleased and proud to be showing it. Can you tell us a little bit about how the project started, how it came together?
Sure. I'll start it and then I'll toss it over, whichever way is over to you. So I wrote this film. I wrote the script as part of a writing the micro budget feature class at Northwestern University, where both Olivia and I attended undergraduate education, and then and it was taught by the filmmaker Stephen Cohn, who's a mentor of mine, an incredible queer filmmaker. And I wrote it as part of our assignment for the quarter. And I was really struck by I was just like, this is the first thing I've written that really speaks to me and my identity and my community. And it came from a place of loving teen movies and never seeing Hebrew school on screen, even though I spent so much of my life in Hebrew school. Fun fact, we filmed Tahara at my childhood synagogue, both in the sanctuary where I was bat mitzvahed and in my Hebrew school classroom, where I got that education for the bat mitzvah. Anyway, so that's where the film came from. The idea was it was a class assignment that I kind of really ran with. And then I took a class at the end of my time at Northwestern called Editing the Feature-Length Script, kind of perfect. And I worked on that script more and more. And one of my classmates is one of our other producers, Dasha Gorin, who was like, we should make this happen. And I was like, but how? And so from there, we teamed up with our third producer, Madison Ginsberg, who worked on lots of films in Chicago, independent projects, and it was a friend and mentor to me in college. And we talked about who would direct it. And I, coming from a playwriting background, that's how I got into creative writing, was I don't intend to direct it. I like working with the director because I think directors can sort of see the spots that I can't. And so I was really blown away by Olivia, who's a few years older than me at Northwestern, a film they made called Pangea, I remember seeing at the end of the year showcase. And I was really I think we should reach out to Olivia. And so I messaged Olivia on Facebook on the day of graduation, being like, hey, would you give the script a read? We're trying to make it. Let me know what you think, if this is something you're interested in. And then I sent it to the wrong email address. And now Olivia can pick it up from there.
Oh, no.
And I mean, I guess I was like, well, maybe the script wasn't ready. So I kind of moved on, but eventually you did reach back out and then send it to the right email address. I read it, and there is one scene in the film in which one of the teens is popping a zit in the mirror. And I remember I turned to my roommate because, of course, I projected the whole script on our wall and was doing a live read. And I was like, oh, when they shoot it, you have to see the zit first. We need to see the pus come out. And so I wrote that down. And then by the end of the script, I had 3 pages worth of ideas that I was then, I guess, going to just give to Jess for whoever was going to direct it. But then we had a really long call where I gave you all these ideas and you just kept saying yes to every single one. And by the end, I was like, oh no, I think I am the director of this. But yeah, it's been a really cool, I think, learning experience for the both of us, in that this thing that I think sort of started spontaneously as an experiment then ended up having all of this meaning for ourselves and for the people who worked on it.
Great. And how did you go about assembling the cast and the rest of the crew?
Oh, great question. I'll start with the cast and then Olivia, you'll take crew, or we can switch, whoever.
Either
We
one.
worked with an amazing casting director who's based in New York named Noah Isabella. She also went to Northwestern with us. And she pulled just some of the best people. Like, honestly, I was so astounded by the amount of self-tapes that we got sent and the interest in the script and the interest in the project, because we didn't have any big people and we didn't have any huge plan. We just sort of had the script and all of Olivia's incredible ideas. So we were sort of like, this is kind of what it's going to be. And Noah just kind of set out a really wide net of performers. I think we both came into this project especially cognizant of the fact that like someone who is Jewish doesn't necessarily look like a certain way. I think when you're casting a project, especially, like it's easy to say like they have to like really like the guy have the brown hair and the thick eyebrows like me. Like that's not true. Like I think we both had such an open mind, and Olivia really wanted to get a wide kind of variety of viewpoints into the casting room, and that really definitely extended over to how we, you know, crewed the set as well. I think something that's so huge is just like having that open mind when it comes to making a piece of intersectional art. Like the first step is like letting people pass that first like mental block of what something should look like. I think that was like a huge thing, and Noah was incredibly helpful in like finding people to let us like ultimately brought us to I almost called them Carrie and Hannah, but it's Rachel and Madeline. Who really now so embody the characters in my mind, though they're not like that in real life. And it was just seeing them, you know, we never got to see them together until we got to set, but like seeing them separately, we just had such a feeling, and we really were so lucky. And everyone else, I mean, the whole world populated through like Noah's work of like posting on websites and reviewing tapes for us, and just, I don't know, shout out to Noah.
Yeah, I mean, and then for the crew, you know, like this was, like Jess said, like the low budget feature. So in the end, like we called in a lot of favors, and our friends really did come through. Like Noah's a friend, and I think even like a week before the shoot, I called on Ashley Mills, who was like one of our first ACs, and Troy Lewis, who ended up taking over the edit weeks before Slam Dance. And then who actually came on set and edited live and like cut live as we were shooting, which was super invaluable because there's a lot of people's first time making a feature. So yeah, beyond that, like we had Tahila DeCastro who shot it, who is just an amazing, amazing talent, who made so much with so little.
Like nothing, like nothing.
Yeah, and I mean, like stylistically, we had like a really great crew on the art side, with Jane, who did our production design, and was also very, very sensitive to like not destroying the synagogue as we went around. And then Avery Ginsberg, who did our costuming. We had Claire Kenna, who did makeup and actually managed to do that zit prosthetically, because it is a fake zit. Yeah, and then the whole squad kind of came together and made something really special.
Well, I think the location is so wonderful and so intriguing, and some of the most intense scenes take place in the bathroom, in the ladies' room. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little. For me, it was like, you know, being in a house and then a room, and then it's like a jewel box in a jewel box, and that, you know, that couch with the upholstery and the wallpaper is just spot on, and a lot of things happen there. Can you talk a bit about it?
Yeah, definitely. So that is the ladies' lounge of Temple Bethel in Rochester, New York. That is where I hid out during Hebrew school and Sunday services and everything, making trouble and not doing my Jewish education. And what we're very fortunate, because the temple was going through a bit of construction while we were filming, that piece of it remained intact, even though I think a lot of people would prefer for it to be updated. But I think thinking of a jewel box is a really beautiful way to like kind of get the concept of the film. I think when you're in those sorts of spaces, to me, always going through life, I'm always kind of like looking for the like little place to hide, or like have, not even hide, but like have a sort of secret in. Like I like the energy of those spaces. And so I think the ladies lounge is such a place where people are like letting parts of their kind of like who they want to be, parts of their projection down. And I think that's where so much of the action actually takes place, because of that willingness to sort of be in this kind of private, secret space. Yes, but that was Jane Clark who like upped the ante. Like she took already a pretty old school room and got us some wicker furniture and an old school vanity and lots of like little pieces that really, I mean, they really made it sing.
And Olivia, from your point of view, what was it like working in these spaces? Was it ever a challenge? I mean, they don't feel small per se, but they certainly feel intimate.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that does have to do with the aspect ratio too. Like we chose to have this small sort of square frame,
Yes.
which ended up serving us really well, because a lot of times, we only had so much money that we could spend on lighting and on production design. So in having the frame actually be smaller, we can get everything on frame like exactly as we wanted to, and design and like really up the ante a bit. The ladies lounge did have, there were some challenges in there in that it was smaller than I thought. So initially I wanted to have a 360 dolly shot where we would put the camera on an actual dolly track and then go around the couch as the two teens like kiss for the first time. But what happened was the day of the shoot, we like came in with the dolly track and it would not fit. Like it was just too, it was actually too big. So we tried like a bunch of different ways. There's just no way to actually get in the room. So what Tahila ended up having to do, have I said this at a Q&A before? I don't know.
I don't know. This is a great story though. This was bananas. Also, I want to set the scene a little bit. The room is filled with haze. It is hazy and there's no windows in there.
Yeah, so I mean, and all of our scenes are filled with haze. Like I wanted a sort of like ethereal look to a lot of the spaces. So that being said, Tahila sort of left the room to think, and Ashley, our first AC, found a garbage can that had wheels under it. And they took the wheels from the trash can and then put the camera on it and did it that way, like managed to make the dolly that way. And it was just sort of a lot of that sort of ingenuity that I think really made the film, those constraints that really brought it to life.
Well, it sounds like there were some challenges, but did you have some fun making it? Because it kind of feels like it.
I would say we had a lot of fun. I would say it was like, we would be so in the moment. I think everyone, this being a lot of people's first features, myself included, like in the moment, there was like that sort of stress, that pressure, that want, at least for me, to be like, this is a professional set, like we're doing it. But then stuff would happen, like too much haze, set off the fire alarm in a synagogue, half the fire department has to come. I have to talk to them. We're like, the fire department's like, you guys making a movie? Like, what's going on? Like that kind of stuff. And that was incredibly fun. Also, I have to give a huge shout out to all of our actors who really rolled with it. Like rolled with it. We're so kind. We're so patient with us as we got over like the bumps of each day, and really brought it like, once we were quiet on set and Olivia had given them where they were going, like they went there. But when we were like figuring things out, and we were a little bit like, oh my goodness, like it's Mother's Day, so the caterer's not going to come, and like this is going to happen and that's going to happen. I think it was great to like have people in that place of like play and experiment and be willing to go with it and not just be like, these kids don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing that really did help is we did so much prep actually beforehand. Like before even getting on set, I made a pitch deck that had all these ideas like consolidated down to the sort of costuming that we wanted. Like we had a storyboard for the whole movie that I made with tequila and like the shot list and everything. And so all that prep is really important because a lot of people did fly in to Rochester. So we had people coming from Chicago and LA and New York City. So it was kind of important that once we did get on set, in order for all that experimentation to happen, that there was a general plan. But then on the weekends, we would go to like Niagara Falls or like to the, the flea market. Yeah, and we had, we got to stay actually in Jess's parents' home too, which I think was really sweet and intimate. So yeah, there was a lot of fun.
Oh, nice. And was the final film very scripted, or was there some room for improvising?
For the most part, it did keep to the script, though there was some really good improv moments from both Rachel and Maddie. And Danny, who played Tristan as well.
Absolutely. Danny's facial expressions, I could never write that. That's all
Yeah.
Danny.
Yeah, I mean, which is super great. I mean, like Rachel is a stand-up comedian, so kind of on set, she would kind of go into this mode of like deep thought and then come out of it like, can I try this? And yeah, a lot of that did make it in too. And we found so much extra that I'd even forgotten about by the time we hit the edit back with Troy. So that just made the film, I think, even better. But yeah, that peanut in a tiny bag line.
That's all Rachel.
was Rachel.
Absolutely. And I think so much of it too is like, I think it did stick to the script, like Olivia said, but I think a lot of the improv was on set, but also in the edit. Like, I think a lot of the film was really found in the way that Olivia and Troy cut it together. And I think the feeling of it, like, I think there were we went through a lot of cuts before we have the cut that, we'll be playing at this festival, of course, that like we kind of like made the movie more dramatic, maybe too dramatic. And then I think we found the comedy through the edit so much so. And that was really like, for me as a writer, like an incredible process to watch, to the pieces like come together, then be rearranged, then come back together. And I think it's like, Olivia mentioned this earlier, but for any filmmakers out there, having an editor on set really is like, it's incredibly helpful to sort of know what you're getting and where you're heading. So you're like not, when you're trying to put that first assembly together, you're not like, oops, we forgot. Like, and I think that was so helpful. And I'm very thankful to Troy for like being willing to come and like sit at that desk in the auditorium and sort of chip away at it, at the project while we worked on it. Like a lot of that really helped the film come together.
Well, the characters are really so strongly drawn. I mean, I still think about them all the time and wonder how they're doing. And you also manage, with, of course, with humor, but to tackle some serious content, some serious subjects. And I was particularly struck by the scene in which Samantha's mother is trying to have a conversation with Carrie and Hannah. And I feel like you learn so much about each of them just in the course of that, somewhat brief conversation. How did you work on that scene?
I think growing up, I definitely had people, not friends, but people's parents pass away, and had experienced that sort of loss where you don't really know how to talk about it as like a teenager. Like you're like, it's sort of about me, but it's not about me, and that sort of thing. So I think I was very interested in exploring how these two people who are, Carrie and Hannah, two best friends, usually like sort of a united kind of force, are not dealing with this in the same way. And I think this is something that I think really brings out like the difference between like you and your friend is like how you talk to somebody's parents. Like I think there's something like like in some houses people yell, in some houses people don't yell, in some houses people are very, very referential, respectful towards elders, in some houses not so much. So I kind of wanted to give a sense of the characters in that moment to be like, what would they do when confronted with an adult? Because I think the world that me and Olivia really worked hard to create is a world of teenagers and teenagerhood, and like this, it's them kind of and nobody else. And so in that moment, and like in the sort of few interactions we have with Maura Klein later, we sort of see how they're being viewed by everybody else. And so that's kind of where that energy in that scene comes from.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's so much in the film that speaks to performativity. Like, because I mean, I think on all sides, like as a teen, you're really just trying to fit a role. And so for Carrie, being respectful and expressing sympathy is like her goal of that entire scene. Whereas with Hannah, she almost wants to appear cool, I think, in every single scene, like even when it falls flat, even when she falls out of the chair, like it's all about, oh, I actually don't feel that sad because grieving would make me uncool. And so when this person comes in who is completely unable to perform because of feeling actual grief, like because of actually being close to Samantha, it kind of disrupts that, I think, in both of them. So the way that Tahila and I wanted to shoot it was so that they were so separate in the frame that it felt like they were actually not even in the same place. So, and that was like another cool thing about shooting it square, was it really did separate out all the characters from one another.
And there are a few moments when the frame opens up, right? I don't want to give a spoiler in case people are watching this without seeing it, but I thought those were quite beautifully done, very magical.
Thank you.
And let's talk a little bit about the animations, which were fantastic. How did that idea come about, and who worked on those?
So before I directed anything live action, all my initial shorts were entirely animated. So that's actually how I learned how to direct. So ever since then, everything that I've ever done has these animated elements in them that I usually make myself.
Wow.
But this time I was like, no.
Well, there's one that Olivia made. There's one that Olivia made.
Yeah, the opening one I did make. But other than that, Emily Ann Hoffman did do a lot of those animations, and she's someone that I met through the Sundance Ignite program. So yeah, that was really cool, I think, because I'd never gotten a chance to work with puppets before. And so she crafted those puppets of Carrie and Hannah, made their little costumes, just like the ones on set. And then a lot of that was directed just like via FaceTime too, because she also lives in Brooklyn while I was in LA. That was really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, I will say that Olivia came to me, this was like on that first initial phone call, being like, can these moments be animated? And it's funny, when I had written script, there's always been these like sort of fantasy moments, because I think I so live in my fantasy world sometimes. So I had never heard from anybody how those should be done. Like one time somebody was like, oh, the color will totally shift, it'll get like really pink or something, and I was like, I don't think so. But that was like in a workshop, no offense to that person. Anyway, but when Olivia was like, oh, those moments should be animated, those moments should be their interior worlds in how they are processing what's going on, I was like, that to me was such a like a click. That was such a like, this is taking this script I wrote to the, I don't know if I'm so into like next level, but like it's taking it to a better place. It's like bringing something new and fresh to it that I'm really excited about. And yeah, Emily was so incredible to work with, so talented. She let me come visit her at the studio where she was working, Mighty Oak, which is in Carroll Gardens in Brooklyn. And that was so nice. And shout out to those folks. They're also a producer on the film. Yes. And then Olivia did sneak an animation in there. I just had to say it because Olivia's like, I always did them myself. I was like, you kind of still did, but just that one, just that one. And we also had, edit this because Olivia's going to say the name of the person. We also had an amazing person who's a student who Olivia found on Instagram.
Callahan Bracken.
Yes,
Shout out to Callahan.
Thank you so much, Callahan, who came in hours before Slam Dance and just gave us a little bit of stuff to really get it to that fantasy place. And that is, I think, such an example of how this film is like truly people coming in, willing to help us and asking for that help, and really, like, I don't know, so grateful. I'm so grateful to them, and it's been such a pleasure to like see this film expand. I think that was such a cool thing too about the animation, was like, even though we were done with the principal photography, we still had to figure out those pieces, which I think helped us continue to find the voice of the film.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Can you tell us about the title, Tahara?
Okay, Olivia, you go.
So at this point, I had made another film called Pangea that had a name that was a little difficult for people to spell or to remember. And initially, the name of the film was Tahara. And I remember we talked a lot about what that meant. And actually, my roommate went to a funeral and came back and was like telling me about Tahara, and was like, what if that was the name of your film? It seems like it might even suit it better. And then I brought it to Jess.
And I was so happy because originally Tahara, that's the burial cloth, the white cloth that Jewish people are often buried in. And it's similar. Tahara is, the cleansing ritual, the bath, but but the cloth I was interested in because I was interested in this idea of covering up. But I think something that me and Olivia talked about is that ritual, that act of purification is sort of what is actually happening over the course of the day. Yes. Like that covering up is what has happened before, or well, it would technically happen after, but like, it's sort of like, that is what this friendship, these relationships, this community is sort of going through. Not to say that like it needed to happen or anything like that, but it's more like sometimes you're in a place where you have to release things that you don't want to let go of. And that's sort of like part of passing on, and in so many ways.
Well, this may be a hard question because of the current situation, but do you have projects that you're either working on or hoping to work on after this? I'm sure you're busy with the rollout of this film, but what might be next?
Yeah, that is an interesting question given everything going on. I mean, I'm looking to still just continue building with my community. Like right now, Jess and I both got representation out of this film, which was a major feat. And shout out to them. So like next things I'm working on is like my next feature film. I have a show that we're going to start taking out, some good stuff that way. I'm also secretly a grad student at USC Games. So I do VR stuff, things that are interactive, world building. But yeah, looking looking at social media, doom scrolling.
Yeah, as Olivia said, we both got representation. That was a long road, and we're definitely trying to get this film out to people. We're so thrilled to be part of this festival, and like wish more than anything that we could be at Lincoln Center and the Jewish Museum. And I mean, I miss it so much, and I think that's like part of our energy. And personally, I'm working on a show about the post-Holocaust period, so that's been fun. It would be in March. It'll be my grandmother, who is a huge Lincoln Center and Jewish Museum person. It would have been her 100th birthday in March. Oh. So, and she's a Holocaust survivor. And so I'm sort of working on something to honor her and her spirit. And so that's kind of where my energy's been. I'm getting a little bit into animation. It's funny. Doing these Q&As with Olivia, and Olivia's like, the way I got into directing is through animating. I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. And that has so lodged itself into my brain that I am sort of teaching myself just basic 2D animation just to sort of play around with that. Kind of a safe way to collaborate with people, very into that. And other than that, I've been watching a ton of movies. So many. I can't wait to watch all the movies in this festival, and really just like trying to go outside when I can. And yes, doom scrolling. Unfortunately, yes, doom scrolling as well.
And I just have one more question. When you were working on the film or now, did you have a intended audience in mind? Like who do you want to reach and to speak to with the film?
This is for teenagers, and it's especially for queer teenagers, like, period.
Yeah.
Those are the reviews I care about the most when we screen. And for Jewish people as well, like, and for especially like Jews of color, I feel like this has been a film where we have gotten really incredible feedback and notes from like all of those communities that have meant the world to us. Yeah, take it away, Jessica.
Yeah, no, I'm going to reiterate that it's for queer teenagers. Absolutely. That's like top audience for us. But I also will say it's for Jewish people, especially Jews of color, to see themselves. But I also would love for Jewish people, especially ones that are really engaged with like how Jews are represented in the media and sort of the Jewish filmmaker community, to see this film and hopefully think like the next project they work on, like include Jews of color in your movie. Like think about what your communities actually look like or what you would like them to look like. I think that to me is something so major, is just making sure those voices are part of it. Because I know in Jewish activist spaces and in more, I was raised conservative, but in more reform communities, that's always a priority when it comes to services. But I want to see that in the art that we're creating, in the conversations we're having. And I would love for this film to be like, not the end all be all, but the very beginning, and then just go with it, keep going. If there's I would love to see like not our movie TV show, but I would love to see a TV show about Jews of color and people navigating a modern Jewish community. Like that's what we're hoping for, I guess.
Oh, fantastic. All very worthy. And thank you so much. And thank you for talking about the film with me. All the best.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.